My name's Jack Sliven, and I've been driving long-haul trucks for 17 years. If there's one thing I've learned in all that time on America's lonely highways, it's that the truest stories are often the ones nobody believes. The cab of my Freightliner Cascadia has been my mobile home ever since my divorce. My ex-wife, Ain, said she couldn't handle the loneliness. I don't blame her. 6 days at home in a month isn't a life most people can stomach. After the divorce, I sold our house in Arizona, paid off my debts, and went full-time on the road. The truck's not spacious, but it's got enough room for a man and his memories. That night, I was driving through the desolate stretches of New Mexico. The clock read 2:27 a.m., and I hadn't seen another vehicle in 4 hours. The fuel gauge had been blinking for a while, warning me I needed to find a gas station soon. The GPS showed the nearest one was 30 miles away, but with the fuel I had left, I wasn't sure I'd make it that far. Just when I was starting to feel desperate, I spotted the faint, flickering lights of an old gas station off to the right. Strange thing was, I didn't remember seeing it on the map or on any of my previous runs through here, but I didn't have much choice. I pulled in. The place looked like a relic from the 1970s, with ancient pumps and a small convenience store glowing dimly. No other vehicles were around. I parked next to a pump, shut off the engine, and climbed down. The cold desert night air hit me hard, and a vast emptiness stretched out around me. No people, just the whistle of wind through dry scrub and a hum of nocturnal insects breaking the silence. I walked over to the pump and gave it a closer look. It was a classic design, no digital display or card reader, just simple mechanical numbers and a metal nozzle. I picked it up, plugged it into my tank, and squeezed the trigger. To my relief, gas started flowing. As I fueled up, I glanced at the convenience store. Through the grimy glass, I could see a counter and a few shelves, but no sign of an employee. Maybe they were in the back. Once the tank was full, I capped it off and headed toward the store to pay. The glass door reflected my image, a middle-aged man with a scruffy beard and tired eyes. Behind me, just my truck and the endless dark. I pushed the door open and a small bell jingled, but no one came to greet me. The store was small, with a few shelves holding snacks, drinks, and basic road supplies. A thin layer of dust coated most of the items. Behind the counter was a door leading to a back area. "Anyone here?" I called out. No response. I looked at the counter and noticed an old, open ledger with a pen beside it. On the yellow page were handwritten transactions dated from the past week. The last entry read, Mike Henderson, 43 gallons, $1.50. "Sorry, what do you need?" I jumped and spun around. A man stood behind me. Not from the back door behind the counter, but from the store's entrance. I hadn't heard the bell when he came in. He looked to be in his 60s, with thinning white hair and a gaunt face carved with deep wrinkles. He wore a dirty workman's outfit, with a name tag that read Earl. "I just fueled up," I said, trying to mask my unease. "Pump 3, full tank. How much do I owe you?" Earl smiled, revealing stained teeth. $2 a gallon. Cheaper than most places around here. It was higher than usual, but I wasn't in a position to argue. I pulled out my wallet and handed him my credit card. Earl glanced at it and shook his head. "Car machine's busted. Cash only." I sighed and fished out my wallet again. Luckily, I always carried some cash for situations like this. I counted out the amount and placed it on the counter. Earl picked it up, didn't bother counting, and stuffed it into his shirt pocket instead of the register. "Where you headed, buddy?" he asked, his tone oddly friendly. "Albuquerque." I replied, keeping it short. "Traveling alone? No one with you?" he pressed, his eyes fixed on me. "Yeah, just me." I was starting to feel uneasy. Thanks to the gas. I gotta hit the road. As I turned to leave, Earl called after me. "Hold on. You should know, the road ahead's got some trouble." I stopped. "What kind of trouble?" "In the last 3 months, 6 truckers have gone missing on the next 50 miles of road," Earl said, lowering his voice. Local cops are looking into it, but they haven't found a trace. Missing how? I asked. Their trucks were found on the side of the road. Earl explained. Engine still running, lights on, but no drivers. No signs of a struggle or anything out of place. They just vanished. I studied Earl, trying to gauge if he was serious or just messing with me. Why haven't I heard about this on the news? You think the local authorities want that kind of story getting out? Earl shook his head. It'd cause a panic. Look, I'm not trying to scare you. Just thought you should know. Maybe you ought to stay here for the night. We've got a room in the back. No thanks, I said. I need to be in Albuquerque by morning. I was starting to wonder if this was some kind of setup to rob my cargo. I'll be careful. As I headed for the door, Earl called out again, "Wait, at least take this." He tossed something to me, and I caught it reflexively. It was an old hunting knife with a bone handle, worn but sharp. For protection, Earl said. And remember, don't stop for anyone on that road, no matter how much they look like they need help. I slipped the knife into my jacket pocket, nodded a thanks, and hurried back to my truck. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Earl standing outside the store, still watching me. Something about his posture sent a shiver through me. I pulled out of the gas station, my mind buzzing with doubt. Maybe Earl was just a strange old man who liked spooking travelers, or maybe I just dodged something dangerous. Deep down, though, I couldn't entirely dismiss his story. The road ahead was completely empty, with dark hills looming against a star-filled sky. I sped up, eager to put distance between me and that place. About 20 minutes after leaving the station, I saw a car parked on the shoulder up ahead, its hazard lights flashing in the dark. As I got closer, I noticed a young woman waving her arms, clearly signaling for help. Earl's warning echoed in my head. Don't stop for anyone. I slowed down a bit, torn. This could be someone genuinely in need, or it could be a trap. I decided not to stop completely, but to ease off the gas as I passed, just to get a better look. As my truck drew nearer, the woman started running toward it, waving frantically. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s, with blonde hair and a thin jacket, unsuited for the chilly desert night. Oddly, she didn't seem panicked or distressed. Her face was too calm for someone stranded in the middle of nowhere at this hour. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Behind her car, in the shadows, there were shapes moving, at least 3 or 4 figures lurking, waiting. They were waiting for me to stop. I floored the gas and shot past her. In the rear-view mirror, I saw the woman freeze in the middle of the road. The desperate act was gone. Now she just glared after me, her expression cold and angry. The figures behind the car stepped out of the shadows, and I caught the glint of metal. They were armed. My heart pounded as I kept driving, pushing the truck as fast as it could go. I didn't dare look back. Only after a few miles did I let out a shaky breath. I'll never know if those were the people responsible for the missing truckers Earl mentioned, but one thing's for sure, his warning saved my life. When I reached Albuquerque the next morning, I stopped at a truck stop and mentioned the strange gas station to a few other drivers. None of them had ever heard of an old station on that stretch of road. When I checked my map and GPS, there was no trace of it either. I never drove that route again, but I still keep Earl's hunting knife in my cab. It's a reminder that sometimes the strangest things on the road are the ones that save your life. I don't like picking up hitchhikers. It's a golden rule in our line of work, especially after hearing too many horror stories about drivers getting robbed, or worse, by the very people they kindly offered a ride. But every rule has its exception, and that night, I broke mine. It was a frigid winter night in Montana, with snow falling so thick I could barely see a few yards ahead. I was driving along U.S. Highway 2, known as the High Line, one of the most remote and isolated stretches in the country. My Freightliner was struggling through the snow, and even with tire chains, I was crawling at a snail's pace. The clock read 10:30 p.m., but the sky was pitch black. No streetlights, no glow from nearby towns, just me, my truck, and the blizzard. The nearest rest stop was over 100 miles away, and at this speed, I wouldn't make it before exhaustion set in. That's when I saw a figure in the snow. At first, I thought it might be a deer or a wolf, but as I got closer, I realized it was a person walking along the shoulder, their back to me. That's damn crazy, I muttered. Who's walking on a highway in a blizzard like this? I gave a light tap on the horn to warn them of my approach, not wanting to startle them. The figure turned, and I saw it was a man, tall, maybe in his 50s, with a silver beard and a heavy coat. He raised a hand, signaling for a ride. I slowed down, weighing my options. Letting a stranger into my cab was always a risk, but leaving an older man to freeze in a blizzard wasn't something I could live with. I decided to stop. If anything went wrong, I had my Glock 19 tucked under the seat. I pulled over and cracked the window. Where you headed? I asked. Cut bank. If you're going that way, the man replied, his voice hoarse from the cold. I've been walking for about 2 hours. My car broke down 15 miles back. Cut Bank was a small town about 70 miles west along my route. Climb in, I said after a moment's hesitation. I'm headed that way. The man gave a grateful smile and climbed into the cab. When he opened the door, a blast of freezing air rushed in. He settled in quickly and shut the door. Thank you so much, he said, rubbing his hands together for warmth. Name's Robert. Jack. I said curtly, then got the truck moving again. What were you doing out there on a night like this? I'm a geologist, Robert answered, working on a research project in the area. My car broke down while I was heading home. He paused. I'm lucky you came along. Not many vehicles pass through here, especially in this weather. I nodded. His story seemed plausible. Montana's rich in minerals, so geological research projects are common. You know what happened to your car? I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. Not sure, Robert said, shaking his head. It just died and wouldn't start again. I'm no expert on old cars. I noticed Robert wasn't carrying any bags or a backpack. You didn't bring any gear? I asked, left in the car. He replied quickly. Nothing valuable, just some rock samples and research equipment. I can go back for it once I get someone to fix the car. We drove in silence for a while. The cab warmed up, and Robert seemed to relax. He stared out the window, watching the snowflakes dance in the headlights. How long you been doing this, Jack? He asked, breaking the quiet. Almost 17 years, I said. Been through most states in the country. You must have seen a lot, Robert said, his voice tinged with curiosity. Anything strange? I shrugged. Just the usual. Accidents, wildlife, the occasional crazy driver. I didn't mention the eerie gas station in New Mexico. You believe in the supernatural, Jack? Robert asked suddenly, his tone dropping lower. The question caught me off guard. Not really. I lied. After 17 years on the road, I'd seen things I couldn't explain. Why do you ask? Robert didn't answer right away. He stared out the window for a moment, then turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You know this stretch is considered one of the most haunted roads in Montana, right? He said, his voice growing more serious. I've heard some rumors. I admitted most truckers know about the ghost stories tied to certain routes, but I don't buy into that stuff. In the last 7 years, 23 people have gone missing on this 200-mile stretch, Robert said, staring straight ahead. Mostly lone drivers at night. Many were never found. It's a wilderness area, I countered. Accidents happen. People get lost in blizzards. Nothing mysterious about that. Some cases are stranger, Robert continued. In 2018, a trucker vanished. His rig was found on the shoulder, engine running, radio on, doors locked, but no driver. No footprints in the snow, no signs of struggle, nothing. I was starting to feel uneasy about this conversation. Why are you so interested in these stories? I asked, keeping my tone steady. My research isn't just geology, Robert admitted. I also study folklore and strange phenomena in the region. The Blackfeet have old stories about creatures that live in blizzards, entities that take people who wander too far. He paused. And replace them. And replace them? I asked, regretting that I'd let him keep talking. The cab suddenly felt colder, despite the heater running full blast. I glanced at Robert in the dim light of the dashboard. His face looked almost mask-like, the wrinkles too deep, his eyes too dark. Interesting, I said, trying to sound casual. But I think those stories are just to scare kids. Robert smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Maybe, but don't you think it's odd that so many people disappear on this same stretch? I didn't answer. We drove in silence for a few more minutes. The blizzard seemed to intensify, and I had to focus hard to keep the truck from sliding off the road. You got a family, Jack? Robert asked out of nowhere. Divorced, I said shortly. No kids. So no one would report you missing if you didn't make it home on time, huh? He said, his voice oddly soft. A chill ran down my spine. The trucking company would notice if I didn't check in. I said, my left hand easing off the wheel, ready to reach the gun if needed. Oh, of course, Robert nodded. Just curious. I decided it was time to end this ride. I'm stopping at the next gas station. You can find help there. Robert looked at me, his eyes glinting in the dark. You scared of me, Jack? No, I lied, but I need to focus on driving in this weather. Robert didn't say anything else, just kept staring out the window. The air in the cab grew heavy with tension. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight, and the nearest gas station was about 20 miles away. After about 15 minutes of silent driving, I saw flickering lights ahead, a small 24/7 gas station with convenience store. I breathed a sigh of relief and began to slow down. This is where we part ways. I said, I need a break, and you can get help here. Robert nodded, his expression unreadable. Thanks for the ride, Jack. You saved my life tonight. I pulled into the station, and Robert opened the door. Cold air flooded the cab again. He stepped out and turned back to me. You're a good man, Jack, he said. Not many would stop for a stranger in this weather. Stay safe out there. You too, I replied, feeling relieved as he left. I watched Robert walk toward the convenience store. There was something off about the way he moved. Too smooth, too agile for an older man who'd been trudging through snow for hours. I decided not to linger. I quickly filled the tank, paid with my car at the pump, and climbed back into the cab. As I settled into the driver's seat, I noticed a strange smell like damp earth and rotting leaves. When I started the engine, I glanced at the store and saw Robert talking to the cashier. He turned and looked at me, and in the bright light of the store, I could see his face clearly. His beard was completely dry, no sign of melted snow. His coat was the same, pristine, despite hours in a blizzard. I backed out of the station and hit the highway, my heart racing. Something was wrong with Robert, and I didn't want to stick around to find out what. By morning, I reached Cutbank and stopped at a diner for breakfast. The blizzard had cleared, and the sun shone on the snow-covered hills. While waiting for my food, I got curious and searched my phone for news about disappearances on Highway 2, like Robert had mentioned. To my surprise, I found articles confirming it. Over the past 7 years, 19 people have been reported missing on that stretch. Not 23, as Robert claimed, but still alarming. And just as he'd said, a trucker had vanished in 2018, his rig found running on the shoulder with no trace of him. But what chilled me was the last article, published just 2 weeks earlier. It mentioned a geologist named Robert Henderson, 53, reported missing while researching near Highway 2. His car was found in a ravine, but there was no sign of him. The article included a photo of Robert Henderson, a thin man with short salt and pepper hair and no beard. He looked nothing like the man I'd picked up. A cold sweat broke over me. The man I'd given a ride to wasn't Robert Henderson. So who or what was he? I never drove that stretch at night again, and I never picked up another hitchhiker, especially not during a blizzard on those lonely roads. There are things out there, hiding in the dark and the storm, waiting for lone drivers like me. Things that pretend to be human. The roads of West Texas have a unique kind of loneliness at night, especially in the remote stretches far from big cities, where you can drive for hours without seeing another vehicle. Just you, your truck, and the vast night sky above. I'd lived in that solitude long enough to find comfort in it. Honestly, it was soothing, just me, the stars, and the steady hum of the engine. No one to judge me, no one to bother me, no one to threaten me. But that night in West Texas changed how I felt about being alone on the road forever. I was hauling a load from El Paso to Midland, mostly equipment for oil rigs. The I-20 is busy and not my preference, so I took a less traveled route through small towns like Van Horn and Pecos. It's quieter, the scenery is better, and frankly, I wanted to avoid the endless convoys on the interstate. It was 1 a.m. when I passed through Pecos. The moon had set, but the stars shone brightly in the clear desert sky. I had about 100 miles to go to Midland, and I decided to drive through the night. I'd taken a break in Van Horn, downed plenty of coffee, and felt alert enough to finish the run. This stretch between Pecos and Midland is desolate. A few tiny towns to route, but it's mostly wide open plains and oil fields. It's the kind of road GPS doesn't love. But I'd driven it enough to know it was faster. About half an hour out of Pecos, I started to feel uneasy. I couldn't pinpoint why, just a nagging sensation at the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. Of course, that was impossible. I checked my rear view mirror and saw no headlights behind me. The road was empty. To shake the feeling, I turned on the radio. At first, it was just static, but after some fiddling, I picked up a local station playing country music. Not my thing, but better than silence. 10 miles later, I saw lights ahead, not headlights, but hazard lights blinking in the dark. As I got closer, I realized it was another truck parked on the shoulder, its hazards flashing. Normally, truckers help each other out when there's trouble. It's an unwritten rule of the road. So I started to slow down, intending to check if the driver needed help. But as I approached, something felt off about the truck. It was a classic black Peterbilt, but it had no company logo on the trailer, no license plate. And when I was about 100 yards away, I saw there was no one in the cab, at least not that I could tell. The uneasy feeling grew stronger. Maybe the driver was checking the tires or something behind the rig. I told myself, but my gut was screaming that something was wrong. As I got closer, I decided not to stop completely. Instead, I'd slow down, take a good look, and if I saw someone clearly in need, I'd pull over. I didn't see any sign of the driver as I approached. No one standing by the truck or walking along the road. I dropped to about 20 miles an hour as I passed, getting a clear view. The cab was empty, just as I thought, with no signs of life. The driver's door was slightly ajar, but no one was around. As I drove past and checked my rear view mirror, I saw nothing. No truck, no flashing lights, just a dark road stretching behind me. What the hell? I muttered, feeling a rush of adrenaline. I was sure I'd just passed a truck. I'd seen it, studied its empty cab. I shook my head and focused on the road ahead. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or a mirage from fatigue. I'd been driving for nearly 14 hours, even with a break, so a hallucination wasn't out of question. I decided to stop at the next gas station to splash water on my face and grab more coffee. There was a small town about 15 miles ahead with a 24/7 station. A few minutes later, I started to relax. The country music played, the road was empty, and I slipped back into the familiar rhythm of a night drive. Maybe I'd imagined the truck. Then I saw it again. Up ahead, about half a mile away, was the same black Peterbilt, hazard lights blinking, parked in almost the exact same position as before. My scalp prickled. This was impossible. There was no way I could have looped around and gotten ahead of it. And how could it vanish from my mirror only to reappear in front of me? I slowed down again, but this time I was more cautious. I'd heard stories about highway robbers using decoy trucks to lure drivers into stopping. As I got closer, it was identical to the truck I'd seen before, black Peterbilt, no logo, no plates, driver's door slightly open, no sign of anyone. This time, I hadn't slowed down much. I sped past, glancing quickly to confirm the cab was still empty. And once again, when I checked my rear view mirror after passing, there was nothing. No truck, no lights, just darkness. My heart pounded. This time, I knew I hadn't imagined it. I'd seen that truck twice, and twice it vanished after I passed. I pushed the accelerator, desperate to reach the next town. I felt watched, even though no other vehicles were on the road. When I glanced in the rear view mirror again, my heart nearly stopped. There were headlights behind me, big ones, from a large truck, closing in at an impossible speed. I floored it, trying to coax more speed from my heavy rig. The speedometer climbed to 70, then 75, 80, way too fast for a loaded truck, but fear overrode reason. The headlights kept gaining, now just 100 yards back and still closing. In the dim light, I could make out the black Peterbilt. How could a truck parked on the shoulder be chasing me? Who was driving it? I didn't have time to think. The truck was right on my tail, so close I couldn't see its headlights in the mirror anymore, just light flooding my cab. Then it rammed me. The impact wasn't as hard as I expected, but it was enough to make my truck lurch. I wrestled with the wheel, tried to keep on the road. Turn back! A voice crackled through the radio, startling me. The station wasn't playing music anymore, just static and a distant, distorted voice. Turn back to where you belong. I switched off the radio, but the voice continued. No one passes through. Turn back or death awaits. The truck behind me rammed again, harder this time. I felt my rear right tire slip off the pavement onto the shoulder. I swerved to correct, nearly losing control. The rig shook violently, the trailer tilting dangerously. In a desperate move, I eased off the gas and hit the brakes. If I couldn't outrun this thing, maybe I could let it pass. I braked hard, bracing for another impact, but it never came. As my truck slowed, the light behind me vanished. I checked the mirror again. The road was empty. No black Peterbilt, no headlights, just darkness. I pulled to a complete stop on the shoulder, trembling. The radio was silent now. I checked my phone. No signal. No surprise in an area known for dead zones. I stepped out of the cab, legs still shaky. The night was quiet except for a faint desert breeze rustling the scrub. I walked around the truck to check for damage, but under my flashlight's beam, I saw no dents or scratches where there should have been after two collisions. That was impossible. I'd felt the impacts, heard metal on metal. A chill ran through me, and I hurried back to the cab. I didn't know what was happening, but I needed to get out of there. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rear view mirror one last time. Still nothing. But when I looked ahead, my heart nearly stopped. Standing in the middle of the road, just 20 yards away, was a tall, thin figure. It was too tall for a human, nearly 7 feet, and impossibly gaunt. It stood motionless, but even in the dark, I could tell it was staring right at me. I flicked on the high beams, and in that brief, blinding moment, I saw it clearly. It wasn't human. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't a man. It had a humanoid shape, but his body was too thin, its limbs too long, and its face. It wasn't a face, just a blank, blurry void, like a smudged photograph. I screamed, slammed the gas, and barreled straight toward it. I didn't care if I hit it. I just wanted out. But as my truck closed in, the figure vanished, not running or stepping aside, just gone like it had never been there. I didn't stop. I drove as fast as the truck could go, ignoring speed limits or safety. I just wanted to reach lights, people, anything. The black Peterbilt and the tall figure didn't appear again that night. About 20 minutes later, I saw the glow of the small town ahead, and some of the fear began to fade. I pulled into the 24/7 gas station as planned, hands still shaking as I poured coffee. The cashier, an older man with a white beard, looked at me with concern. "You okay, buddy?" he asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I gave a weak laugh. "Long night," I said. Then, out of curiosity, I asked, "You ever hear of a haunted truck on the road between here and Pecos?" The man's face grew serious. "You saw the black Peterbilt, didn't you?" he said quietly. My pulse quickened. "How'd you know?" "Plenty of folks have seen it on that stretch," he sighed. "Especially on moonless nights like this." "What is it?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "They say about 30 years ago, a trucker died out there." The man began, his voice low, like he was telling a ghost story. "He was hauling equipment for an oil company, like you. Something happened to him on that road. No one knows what. They found his rig on the shoulder. But he was gone. Just a pool of blood on the seat and claw marks on the door, like he was trying to escape something." "And the truck?" I asked. "They towed it. A black Peterbilt. But that night, it disappeared from the impound lot. Ever since, drivers report seeing it on that road. It appears, vanishes, sometimes even chases them." "And the tall man?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The one with no face?" The cashier paled. "You saw the tall man?" "If that's what you call it, yeah." "No one knows what it is," he said, glancing around like he was afraid of being overheard. "Some say it's what killed the trucker. Others say it's the trucker himself or his spirit, somehow. But everyone who's seen it says it tries to stop you from passing through." "Why?" I asked, though I could guess. "Maybe it's protecting others from whatever got him," he shrugged. "Or maybe it wants company. Who knows?" I paid for my coffee and returned to the truck, the man's words echoing in my head. Maybe it was just a local legend, an urban myth to scare travelers. But I'd seen that truck. I'd felt it hit me. And I'd seen that thing, the tall man, standing in the road. I delivered my load to Midland the next morning, my mind still reeling. I looked online for stories about the haunted truck in West Texas and the tall man, and I was surprised to find plenty of similar accounts. Other truckers and travelers reported encounters on that stretch. A truck that appears and vanishes, sometimes chasing them, and a tall, faceless figure standing in the road. One detail chilled me to the bone. Nearly all the encounters involved drivers hauling oil field equipment, like me that night. No one knows what happened to the original trucker who vanished 30 years ago, but many believe he ran into something not of this world. Something drawn to the oil equipment he was carrying or the oil itself. Now his ghost, in the form of Black Peterbilt and the eerie tall man, is trying to warn or save other drivers from the same fate. I don't know if I believe in ghosts. I don't know if what I experienced was real or a hallucination from exhaustion. But I know one thing. I'll never drive that stretch at night again, and I'll never haul oil equipment through West Texas. Because whatever's out there, I don't want to meet the tall man or the Black Peterbilt again. One encounter was enough for a lifetime. I'm not afraid of tunnels. Honestly, after 17 years of driving long-haul trucks, I've passed through hundreds of them across the United States, from the long, modern ones in the east to the short, rickety ones in the western mountains. They're just holes in the earth, built to get us from point A to point B faster. Nothing scary about them. That's what I used to think, at least until I drove through Tunnel Creek. It was a routine delivery to Seattle, hauling office furniture for some new tech company. I was taking my usual route through Idaho when a landslide blocked I-90, forcing me to find an alternate path. My GPS suggested a detour through the hilly backroads of eastern Washington, a route I'd never taken before. I checked my map and it seemed fine, a bit longer, but it'd still get me to Seattle on time. As I left the highway and turned onto smaller roads, the scenery started to change. The forest grew denser. the hills steeper. It was early October, and the leaves were turning red and gold, creating a breathtaking view as the late day sunlight filtered through them. The road was quiet. I only passed another vehicle every now and then. As night fell, I started to get a little uneasy. I hadn't seen a town or a gas station for at least an hour, and my dashboard showed I had about a quarter tank of gas left, enough to keep going for a while, but not enough to feel comfortable on these remote roads. My GPS indicated a small town called Crest Falls about 30 miles ahead. I decided I'd stop there to refuel and maybe grab a bite to eat. As I kept driving, the road grew more winding, snaking through the hills. Up ahead, I spotted a sign, Tunnel Creek, 5 miles. The tunnel wasn't marked on my GPS, which was a bit odd, but not unheard of on back roads like these. As I got closer, another sign appeared. Tunnel Creek, 1.2 miles, constructed in 1923. Headlights required. A long tunnel, but nothing I hadn't handled before. Still, I wondered if it was wide enough for my rig, given how old it was. I slowed down as I approached the tunnel's entrance. When it came into view, an unexpected chill ran through me. The tunnel's mouth looked like a gaping black maw carved into mountainside, framed by weathered stone guardrails. There were no lights illuminating the entrance, just a faded sign warning of a maximum height of 13 feet 6 inches. Barely enough clearance for my truck. I stopped for a moment, staring into the darkness ahead. Some deep, primal instinct urged me not to go in, but that was ridiculous. It was just a tunnel. I flicked on my headlights and eased forward. The darkness swallowed my truck whole. My headlights lit up the road ahead and the rough stone walls of the tunnel. I noticed there were no lights inside, no strips along the ceiling or safety lights along the walls. Just absolute darkness and the beam of my headlights. Weird as hell. I muttered, giving my horn a light tap, a habit I'd picked up in unlit tunnels. The sound echoed oddly, lingering longer than I expected. As I drove deeper, something felt off. The tunnel seemed narrower than I'd anticipated, the ceiling lower. I had to keep my truck dead center to avoid scraping walls. The road surface was rough, riddled with potholes and cracks that made the truck shake every few seconds. 1.2 miles, I told myself. At this speed, it'll take about 2 minutes. But after 3 minutes of driving, I still saw no sign of the exit. I started to wonder if the sign was wrong. Maybe the tunnel was longer than they'd said. I checked my dashboard and realized the radio was off. I didn't remember turning it off. I reached over and switched it back on, but all I got was static. I scanned through the channels. Nothing but white noise. Then, cutting through the static, I heard something. A faint voice, a man's, distant and broken. "Turn back! Not safe! Turn back!" I stopped scanning, listening intently. The voice sounded too clear to be random radio interference. It's not a tunnel. It doesn't let anyone out. A chill ran down my arms. 27 missing since 1923. I switched off the radio, my hand trembling slightly. Just noise, I told myself. Just signals getting scrambled by the rock. Right then, my headlights flickered and dimmed for a second before flaring back to life. My heart raced. This was not the time for electrical issues. I'd been driving for at least 5 minutes now. If the tunnel was really 1.2 miles long, I should have seen the exit by now. I sped up, desperate to get out as soon as possible. The headlights flickered again, this time staying dark for a full second. When they came back on, I nearly screamed. Standing in the middle of the road, just a few yards ahead, was a man, or at least it looked like a man, a shadowy figure in old-fashioned clothes, standing motionless, facing me. I swerved aside and slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding. The man, or whatever it was gone. Damn it! I whispered, my hand shaking on the wheel. Damn it! I considered reversing back to the entrance, but I'd come too far to do that safely. The only way out was forward. I eased the truck back into motion, my eyes scanning the road ahead. The headlights kept flickering erratically. Each time they went out, it lasted a little longer. I started imagining what would happen if they died completely, leaving me in pitch black darkness in the middle of the tunnel. As I drove on, I noticed something strange. The road surface under my tires had changed. It wasn't concrete anymore. It was dirt. I could feel the truck moving differently as it rolled over the softer surface. I glanced down and saw that the concrete had given way to a dirt path. The tunnel stone walls had changed too. They were no longer lined with concrete, just raw, jagged rock, as if the tunnel had become more primitive, less constructed. This can't be happening. I muttered, a wave of panic rising. What the hell is this? The radio crackled to life on its own, spitting static, and that voice again, louder now. It changes to match your fear. It won't let you out. I switched it off, but it turned back on. 27, now 28 gone. I slammed my fist into the radio, and it finally went silent. I was driving faster now, ignoring the potholes and sharp turns, just wanted to escape this nightmare. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever. I'd been driving for at least 10 minutes. Impossible for a tunnel supposedly 1.2 miles long. I started to think I was trapped in some kind of loop, driving the same stretch of tunnel over and over. And then my headlights went out completely. Absolute darkness engulfed me, so deep and thick I couldn't see my own hands in front of my face. I stopped the truck immediately, terrified I'd crash into a wall or plunge into a pit. Stay calm, I told myself. Try and control my breathing. Stay calm, Jack. I grabbed my phone, hoping for some light. The screen was black, even though I knew it was fully charged. I pressed the power button. Nothing. The darkness was suffocating. And in that darkness, I started to hear things. Whispers at first, so faint they could have been my imagination, like voices speaking from far away. Then came soft scraping sounds, gravel shifting, light scratches on metal. I tried the cabin's interior light switch, but it didn't work. I turned the key, hoping to restart the engine and restore power. The engine didn't respond. The whispers grew louder, closer, until I could make out individual words. Welcome to us, stay here forever. A cold breath brushed the back of my neck, and I whipped around. Nothing, just darkness. But I knew something was there. I could feel it. Who's there? I said, my voice trembling. The whispers turned into soft laughter, a dry, rustling sound like dead leaves in the wind. And then in the darkness, I started to see lights, faint, glowing specks like fireflies, but they didn't flicker. They moved with purpose, closing in from all directions. In their dim glow, I began to see faces, pale, ghostly faces with hollow eyes and mouths frozen in silent screams. They floated in the air, drifting through the walls, through the floor of the truck. This wasn't a normal tunnel anymore. I wasn't even sure it was a tunnel at all. I pressed myself against the door, frantically searching for the handle. I knew leaving the truck might be a bad idea, but my survival instincts were taking over. I needed to get out of the cab. I needed to run. The door handle was gone. My fingers found only a smooth surface, as if the door had been sealed shut. The floating faces drew closer, their eerie light illuminating the cab with a ghostly glow. I could see them clearly now, men and women of all ages, all with the same look of horror and despair. Stay with us, become one of us. Panic consumed me. I pounded on the window, but it wouldn't break. I kicked the dashboard, yanked the steering wheel, screamed until my throat burned. Nothing worked. The faces came closer, so close I could feel the cold radiating from them. One pressed against the window beside me. A middle-aged man with completely black eyes, staring at me with unmasked hunger. 27, now 28, now you. As his face touched the glass, the window began to frost over, intricate patterns of ice spreading like spiderwebs. The cold seeped into the cab, and I could see my breath forming clouds in front of me. I closed my eyes, certain this was the end, and then I heard a loud, blaring horn, real tangible, and saw a light piercing through my closed eyelids. I opened my eyes and saw bright headlights speeding toward me. Another truck. Instinct took over. I yanked the wheel to the right, hugging the tunnel wall to avoid a collision. The other truck roared past, its horn blasting angrily. And just like that, my headlights flared back on. The radio blared country music. My phone lit up with a text notification. The engine purred steadily. Up ahead, not far away, I could see daylight, the tunnel's exit. I floored the gas, racing toward the light as if my life depended on it. Maybe it did. The truck burst out of the tunnel into the brilliant afternoon sunlight. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the shoulder, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. I glanced back through the rear view mirror, half expecting to see those ghostly faces chasing me out of the tunnel. But all I saw was an ordinary weathered tunnel with a small sign beside it. Tunnel Creek, constructed in 1923. I checked the dashboard clock. I'd lost about 4 minutes passing through the tunnel. Perfectly reasonable for a 1.2-mile stretch. But it hadn't felt like 4 minutes. It felt like hours. And what I'd seen, what I'd heard, I grabbed my phone, intending to call someone, anyone, just to hear a real human voice. That's when I saw the text notification on the screen. A new message from an unknown number. Welcome to Tunnel Creek. 27 missing. Now 28. Now you. We will always be with you. I dropped the phone like it was on fire. When I picked it up, trembling, the message was gone. No text in my inbox. I continued my trip to Seattle, but I couldn't shake what I'd experienced in Tunnel Creek. I looked at the tunnel later and found it had a dark history, built in 1923, as the sign said. But what it didn't mention was that 8 workers died during its construction. And according to local reports, there were persistent stories of vehicles vanishing in the tunnel, especially at night. No one knew the exact number, but some sources suggested around 20 people had gone missing in or near the tunnel since it was built. 20 plus the 8 workers made 28. I delivered the load to Seattle on time, but I quit my trucking job a month later. I've had nightmares about the tunnel, about those faces in the dark, and sometimes I still get strange messages on my phone. They appear for a moment, then vanish without a trace. We're still here. We're waiting for you to come back. I've never driven through Tunnel Creek again. In fact, I don't even go through Washington anymore. And I'll never, ever drive through a tunnel at night again. Because I know now that not all tunnels are just holes in the earth. Some are gateways to other places. And there are things on the other side. Ancient, hungry things ready to welcome unlucky travelers who stray into their domain. Things that are always counting, always waiting for the next one, the 29th. After nearly 2 decades of long-haul trucking, I learned one lesson above all. Never drive when you're too tired. Fatigue kills truckers more than anything else. When your eyelids get heavy and your head starts to nod, it's time to pull over. No matter how close you are to your destination or how tight your delivery deadline is. I should have remembered that lesson before stopping at Pine Lake Resort. It was a hot summer night in Michigan around July. I was hauling a load of farm equipment from Detroit to Minneapolis, and I'd been driving for 14 hours with only a few short breaks. I should have stopped hours earlier, but a massive traffic jam on I-94 had put me behind schedule, and I needed to make up time. By 1 a.m., I had to admit I couldn't go on, for cans of Red Bull weren't cutting it anymore, and I was starting to see shapes flickering at the edges of my vision, a sure sign of dangerous exhaustion. I decided to find a place to pull over and rest for a few hours. The problem was, I was in the middle of rural western Michigan on a lightly traveled 2-lane state road, 40 miles from any major town. I hadn't seen a rest stop or a gas station in nearly an hour. Just when I thought I had to park on the shoulder and risk a fine, I spotted a sign, Pine Lake Resort vacancies, turn right 2 miles. I almost ignored it. Resorts rarely allow big rigs in their lots, But then I saw a smaller text below. Truck parking, hot showers, restaurant open 24/7. Thank God. I muttered, flicking on my right blinker. A night in a real bed sounded far better than curling up in my cab. The road to the resort was a narrow two-lane path cutting through dense pine forests. The towering trees blocked out the moonlight, making the road darker and adding to my exhaustion. I rolled down the window, letting the cool night air keep me alert. After about 2 miles, the pines thinned, and I saw lights ahead. Pine Lake Resort appeared like an oasis of light in the dark. It wasn't a modern or fancy place. It had a retro 1950s vibe, with a 2-story main building sporting a neon reception sign and a dozen small cabins stretching along the shore of a small lake behind it. The front parking lot was large, with a designated area for trucks off to the side. I parked in the truck area, grabbed my overnight bag, and trudged wearily toward the main building. Even past midnight, the resort seemed active. The lights in the main building were on, and I could see a few cabins with lights glowing behind their windows. A small bell jingled as I pushed open the front door. The reception area was decorated in classic Americana, wood panel walls, a stone fireplace in use in the summer heat, and stuffed animal heads mounted above. A massive deer stared down at me from over the front desk, its glass eyes catching the light oddly. A man stood behind the counter, his back to me, arranging keys on a board. When he heard the bell, he turned. "Welcome to Pine Lake," he said in a low, slightly raspy voice. He was probably in his 60s, with a weathered face that had seen too much sun, white hair, and strikingly bright blue eyes. His name tag read Vernon, manager. "Hey," I said, trying not to yawn. "You got any rooms? I need a place to crash for the night." "You're in luck," Vernon said, flashing a smile that showed teeth too white for a man his age. "We got one cabin left, number 12, down by the lake. Nice and quiet." "Sounds perfect." I nodded. "How much?" $60 a night. Includes breakfast at our diner," Vernon replied, pulling a registration form from under the counter. "Hot showers are open all night if you need to relax, and the diner's 24/7 if you're hungry." I filled out the form, handed over my credit card, and got a heavy key attached to a wooden tag engraved with 12. "Your cabin's at the end of that path," Vernon said, pointing through the window to a small trail leading to the lake. "Our truck lot's secure, but I'd still bring anything valuable." "Thanks," I said, too tired to say much else. "One more thing," Vernon added as I turned to leave. "We got a few rules at Pine Lake. First, no swimming in the lake after sunset. Second, keep your cabin door locked at night. And third, if you hear any strange noises outside, especially calls or cries, don't go out to check. Just call the front desk." I stared at him, not sure I'd heard right. "Sorry, what?" Vernon chuckled, clapping me on the shoulder. "Don't worry, just standard safety rules. We're near a wildlife preserve, and sometimes animals wander through at night. We don't want guests running into bears or wolves. You get me?" "Oh, yeah, sure," I said, managing a weak smile. "Thanks for the heads up." As I stepped outside, the night air had grown colder, and a thin fog was forming over the lake, creating an eerie scene under the moonlight. The path to cabin 12 was poorly lit, with only a few small lamps casting dim pools of light. I passed the other cabins, noting that some had lights on behind drawn curtains, while others were dark and silent. When I reached cabin 12, I saw it was slightly separated from the others, perched almost at the lake's edge. It looked older, too, with darker wood and a small overhang above the door. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and flipped on the light. The cabin was simple but clean. A large bed, a small table with 2 chairs, an old TV, and a tiny bathroom in the back. The window faced the lake, though all I could see now was a wall of white fog reflecting the moonlight. Too exhausted to care, I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the bed. I meant to shower, maybe check out the diner. But the moment my head hit the pillow, I was out cold. I woke to a sound. At first, groggy with sleep, I wasn't sure what I'd heard. Then it came again, a soft tapping, like someone was rapping on the rear window, the one facing the lake. I opened my eyes and glanced at the window. The curtains were drawn, but through a small gap, I could see only darkness outside. I checked the bedside clock. 3:27 a.m. tap, tap. There was again, deliberate, like someone was using their fingernails on the glass. I sat up, alert now. It could just be a branch, I told myself, or maybe a night bird. I reached for the lamp but froze when I heard another sound. Not tapping this time, but a voice. A small, almost whispering voice cleared through the glass. Jack, Jack, come outside, Jack. My whole body went rigid. How the hell did anyone out there know my name? Jack, we need help. Please come outside. It was a child's voice, I realized with a jolt. A little girl, maybe 10 years old, called my name from the lake. Vernon's warning echoed in my mind. If you hear any strange noises outside, especially calls or cries, don't go out to check. I sat frozen on the bed, my heart pounding. After a minute, I decided I had to see what was going on, not go outside, but at least peek through the window. If a kid was really in trouble out there, I couldn't just ignore it. I carefully slid my feet to the floor and moved toward the window, trying to be quiet. The old wooden floor creaked under my weight. When I reached the window, I stopped and listened. Jack, we know you're in there. Please come outside. We're drowning. The voice was chillingly real, a terrified, desperate child. But something was wrong with it. It was too clear, too perfect for a kid, supposedly drowning. And why we? I cautiously pulled the curtain aside and looked out. The fog over the lake was thicker now, a solid wall of white reflecting the moonlight. At first, I saw nothing but the fog. Then I saw them. Figures standing on the lake's surface, silhouetted against the mist. Not one, but 4 or 5. They looked like children, small and slight, but I couldn't see their faces, just dark, hazy shapes. They were standing on the water, not swimming. Jack, please come outside. We're so cold. The voice came from those figures, but it didn't sound entirely human. It was like a copy of a child's voice, but off somehow, as if someone was trying to mimic it and not quite succeeding. I yanked the curtain shut, my heart racing. Whatever was out there, it wasn't kids, and it knew my name. I grabbed my phone, but of course, there was no signal. I looked around for a landline and spotted an old rotary phone on the bedside table. I hurried over, picked up the receiver, and dialed 0 for the front desk. Tap, tap, tap. The tapping had moved to the front door. I froze, the receiver still at my ear, listening to the bell-like sound. Jack, we know you're in there. The voice was at the door now, no longer a child's. It was deeper, older, rougher. The phone had no dial tone, no ringing, just a faint static hiss. Tap, tap. Open the door, Jack. We just want to talk. The voice shifted again, now sounding like an adult man's. What the hell was happening? I gently set the receiver down and grabbed my phone again, turning on the flashlight. Still no signal, but the light worked. I swept the beam around the cabin, looking for something to use as a weapon. The tapping grew louder, more urgent, and now it was coming from all sides. The front door, the back window, even the walls. Jack, let us in. We're hungry. The voice was no longer pretending to be friendly. It was guttural, menacing. I snatched a wooden chair by the table, ready to swing it if needed. The tapping turned into pounding, almost like blows. And then, suddenly, everything went silent. The abrupt quiet was even more terrifying than the noise. I stood there, chair raised, heart hammering, waiting for the next sound. Creak. A soft groan came from the bathroom, the sound of old floorboards under someone's weight. I spun around, aiming the flashlight at the bathroom door, which was slightly ajar. A pale, bony hand gripped the edge of the door, its fingers too long, too thin, with sharp, claw-like nails. It wasn't human. I didn't wait to see more. I lunged to the front door, fumbled with the lock, and threw it open, still clutching the chair. I sprinted down the path toward the main building, not daring to look back. The main building was still lit up, and I burst inside, gasping for breath. Vernon was behind the front desk, as if he hadn't moved all night. He looked at me with an unervingly calm expression. "Trouble with your cabin, Mr. Sullivan?" he asked, his tone far too composed. "There's something in my cabin," I panted. "In the bathroom, and outside by the lake, things that look like kids." Vernon sighed, like he'd heard this 100 times before. "I told you not to go outside if you heard anything, didn't I?" "I didn't go outside." I snapped. "They were in my cabin, and how the hell do they know my name?" Vernon just shrugged. "They know everything. That's why we have rules." "What are they?" I demanded, still gripping the chair. "The ones who live under the lake," Vernon said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "They were here before the resort, before the town. They've always been here, and they're always hungry." "You're insane," I said, backing away. "I need to call the police." "No self-service out here," Vernon reminded me, "and the cabin phones only connect to the front desk." To me, I looked at Vernon closely for the first time and realized something was wrong with him. His skin was too pale, almost gray in the light, and his eyes, those unnaturally bright blue eyes, didn't blink. They stared at me with a hunger that wasn't human. "You're one of them," I whispered, a chill running through me. Vernon smiled, revealing teeth that were too white, too small. "Not quite. I'm their caretaker. I look after them, find them food, like you." I raised a chair. "Stay the hell away from me." "You can't leave, Mr. Sullivan," Vernon said, shaking his head. "You signed the register. You agreed to our terms and conditions." I glanced at the counter, where the register still lay open. I could see my signature, but below it, what I thought was standard legal fine print was actually repeated lines. "I willingly surrender. I willingly surrender. I willingly surrender." Outside, I heard footsteps, multiple footsteps, approaching the main building, accompanied by sounds that weren't human, hungry, keening noises. "They're coming," Vernon said, his smile widening. "They like it when their prey runs. Makes the meal more exciting." I didn't wait to hear more. I hurled the chair at Vernon, knocking him back, and bolted for the back door I'd spotted behind the counter. I ran through a dark hallway, found an exit, and threw it open. Outside, the fog was thick, but I could make out the parking lot and my truck in the distance. I sprinted toward it, feeling rather than hearing the presence chasing me. In the fog, I caught glimpses of shapes moving, figures that weren't quite human, with limbs too long, too thin, moving with unnatural grace. I reached the truck, leaped into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. I still had the keys in my pocket. Thank God. I started the engine and peeled out of the lot at a reckless speed. The headlights cut through the fog. In their beams, I glimpsed them, at least a dozen creatures standing at the edge of the lot. They looked human-like but wrong, with limbs too long, bodies too thin, heads too large. Their faces, if you could call them faces, were just blank, dark voids where eyes, noses, and mouths should have been. They didn't chase me as I sped toward the road back to the highway. They just stood there, watching me go, as if they knew something I didn't. Maybe they did, because halfway to the highway, the engine started coughing and sputtering. Warning lights flashed on the dashboard, and the truck slowed to a crawl. No, I muttered, flooring the gas, but it was no use. The truck stopped, the engine dead. I tried to restart it. Nothing. The fuel gauge showed a full tank. This made no sense. Then I remember my overnight bag. I'd left in the cabin with my backup phone, a pocket knife, and other things that might have been useful. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him, Vernon, walking slowly, confidently down the road, knowing I wasn't going anywhere. And behind him, moving in the fog were the other shapes, the things from under the lake. I climbed out of the cab and started running. I didn't know where I could go in these dense pine forests, but I couldn't stay there. I ran about half a mile when I heard an engine and saw headlights cutting through the darkness. An old pickup truck appeared on the road ahead. I stood in the middle of the road, waving frantically. The truck stopped, and an older man leaned out the window. "You need help?" he asked, eyeing me with concern. "Please," I gasped. "I need to get out of here now." He looked at me, then past me. "You're running from Pine Lake Resort, aren't you?" I nodded, too exhausted to be surprised he knew. He sighed. "Get in, quick." I didn't need to be told twice. I jumped into the passenger seat, and the truck sped off before I could close the door. "Was it Vernon?" the man asked as we hit the highway. "You know him?" I asked. "Everyone local knows about Pine Lake," he said, shaking his head. "And the things that live there." "What are they?" I asked. "No one knows for sure," the man said. "Some say there was a village where the lake is now, and a big flood drowned it, killed everyone. Others say those things were always there, hiding under the water, waiting. But we all know Pine Lake is where people disappear. Vernon said he was their caretaker. I muttered that he feeds them. "He's been there for decades," the man nodded. "Doesn't age. He finds food for them in exchange for something. Maybe eternal youth. Maybe something worse." "Why doesn't anyone do anything?" I asked. "Why aren't the police involved?" The man laughed bitterly. "You think we haven't tried? Cops go there, but they never find anything out of place. No one disappears when the cops are around. No sign of Vernon or the creatures. Just an abandoned resort by a lake. And when they leave, it all starts again." I stared out the window at the dark pine forest rushing by. "My truck's gone," I said. "Like anything you leave at Pine Lake." The man said, "They don't just eat people, you know. They eat everything: metal, plastic, clothes. They consume it somehow, make it part of whatever they are." A chill ran through me as I thought about what might have happened if this man hadn't shown up, if I had become part of those things. "I'll take you to the nearest town," the man said. "You can call for a ride from there. But I'd advise against reporting what happened. No one will believe you, and you'll just get trouble." "What about my truck?" "My job?" I asked, still reeling. "Tell him it was stolen," he shrugged. "Or burned. Anything. Just don't mention Pine Lake." I nodded, too tired and scared to argue. We drove in silence for a while before a thought struck me. "Why were you on that road this late?" I asked. "In the middle of the night?" The man was quiet for a long moment, then said softly, "My daughter disappeared at Pine Lake 30 years ago. Every full moon, I drive through there, hoping to find someone else I can save. Some nights I get lucky." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I found another trucking job later. I reported my old truck stolen, as the man suggested, and dealt with the fallout from my company. I never mentioned Pine Lake. I looked up the resort afterward. No website, no listings in travel guides, no online reviews, like it didn't exist. But I know it's there, and I know what lives under that lake. Things that called my name, pretended to be children, try to make me one of them. I never drive through that part of Michigan anymore, and I never stop at any resort by a lake at night, no matter how tired I am, because I know that in those dark, deep waters, there are things that are hungry, things that know your name, things that will pretend to be anyone, anything to lure you close. And Vernon, the man who never ages, is still waiting at the front desk, ready to welcome new guests to Pine Lake.